"You look nervous," Julian whispered, smiling as he adjusted his cufflinks. I stared straight ahead. "You changed the locks," he chuckled. "You moved out. That's abandonment." "That was my house, too." His lawyer leaned closer. "Mrs. Vance, please don't speak to my client." Julian's smile widened. "See? Even now, you don't know when to stop." The bailiff called the room to order. Wood scraped. Papers rustled. The judge entered without looking at me. Julian leaned back. "Relax. This will be quick." "You emptied my savings," I said. "They were marital assets," he replied. "I protected them." "By freezing my account?" "You're emotional," he said gently. "That's why this is happening." The judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Vance, temporary asset control will remain with the petitioner." Julian squeezed his pen. "Thank you, Your Honor." My lawyer whispered, "We can appeal later." "Later?" I muttered. Julian glanced at me. "Hear that? Later." The judge continued. "Mrs. Vance, access to funds will be reviewed pending forensic accounting." Julian leaned over. "Which you can't afford." I clenched my jaw. Outside, cameras flashed. Julian stepped in front of me. "We should show unity." "Move," I said. "Smile," he whispered. "You still represent my brand." A reporter asked, "Mr. Vance, are you confident in the outcome?" Julian laughed. "The law works when you respect it." I turned away. At the house, my key didn't fit. I knocked. Julian opened the door holding a glass. "Oh, you're early." "Where are my things?" He pointed. "Lawn." I stepped outside. Trash bags, my clothes, my books soaked in gutter water. "You can't do this," I said. "They're saying you took money," my sister said over the phone. I stared at the wall. "I didn't." "I know, but Julian's story is everywhere." "Of course it is." She hesitated. "People believe him." In court the next week, Julian arrived late on purpose. The judge frowned. "Mr. Vance, this court has a schedule." Julian smiled. "My apologies, Your Honor. Board meeting." His lawyer added, "Critical merger discussions." The judge nodded. "Understood." I whispered to my attorney, "If I was late." "Don't," he whispered back. Julian leaned over. "You should really manage your time better." "I was here early," I said. "Then you wasted it," he replied. The hearing started. Julian's lawyer spoke first. "Mrs. Vance has demonstrated erratic behavior," he said. "Emotional spending? Questionable withdrawals?" I stood. "That was my research grant." "Objection," his lawyer said. "She's testifying." "Sustained," the judge replied. Julian didn't look at me. He didn't have to. Afterward, in the hallway, a woman I used to call a friend avoided my eyes. "Did you hear?" someone whispered. "She tried to drain him." I walked past them. Outside, Julian answered reporters again. "She needs time," he said kindly. "This is hard for her." I snapped. "Stop pretending you care." He turned, surprised. "Careful. About what?" "You're proving my point." "That night, Dad poured tea." "They think I'm lying," I said. He nodded. "People like clean stories." "I gave him everything," I said. "My time, my work." Dad stirred his cup. He took credit. He took my voice. Silence sat between us. The next hearing was worse. Julian's lawyer filed 3 new motions. My attorney groaned. "This will take weeks." Julian smirked. "Justice takes patience." "You're bleeding me dry," I said. He leaned close. "That's the idea." The judge called for testimony. Julian stood confident. "I built the company. I took the risk." I whispered, "I was there." He glanced at me. "You watched." "That's a lie." "Objection," his lawyer said. Argumentative. Sustained, Julian continued. She struggled with stress. I encouraged her to rest. By locking me out? I blurted. The judge looked annoyed. Mrs. Vance, control yourself. Julian sighed. See? During recess, Julian cornered me. You're embarrassing yourself, he said. You stole from me. He smiled. I optimized. Why are you doing this? Because I can. Dad stood at the end of the hall. Julian noticed him and laughed. Still bringing the old man, Julian said loudly. Moral support? Dad didn't respond. Julian leaned toward him. Sir, this is grown-up business. Dad looked at him calmly. So I see. Julian laughed again. You don't even know how this works. Dad tilted his head. I know enough. Julian waved him off. Come on, Julia. Let's be realistic. It's Julia, I said. That's what I said. The judge returned. Back in session, Julian's lawyer requested another delay. For review, he said. Granted, the judge replied. I slammed my folder shut. This isn't fair. The judge sighed. Life rarely is. Outside, Julian stopped me again. You should settle, he said, before this gets uglier. It already is. For you, he replied. That evening, my phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers, messages, articles. CEO wins control in contentious divorce. I turned the screen face down. Dad sat beside me. He called you a joke, I said quietly. Dad nodded. I heard. He thinks you don't matter. Dad looked at his hands. He's mistaken. I laughed bitterly. Everyone believes him. Dad met my eyes. Not everyone. He stood and walked to the balcony. Who are you calling? I asked. A friend, he said. He paused, then added, an old one. I watched him dial. He didn't introduce himself. He just said, it's Arthur. Then he listened. And for the first time since Julian smiled in court, I felt the room tilt back in my favor. Did anything happen? I asked the next morning. Dad set the kettle down. Not yet. That's it? He met my eyes. That's enough. At court, Julian looked relaxed again. Still broke? He whispered as he passed me. Still lying? I whispered back. He laughed. Careful. They don't like bitter women. His lawyer leaned in. My client will not engage. Julian smirked. See how fast they protect me? The judge entered. Let's proceed. Julian's lawyer stood. We request dismissal of the respondent's latest motion. My lawyer whispered, We're losing ground. I clenched my fists. Julian leaned over. Told you. Paper beats feelings. The judge flipped pages. Mr. Vance, there's a notice attached here. Julian frowned. What notice? The clerk spoke. Sealed correspondence, Your Honor. Julian's lawyer stiffened. We weren't informed. The judge tapped the document. It was delivered this morning. Julian stood. May we approach? Denied, the judge said. Sit. Julian sat slowly. He whispered, What did you do? I told the truth, I said. He scoffed. You don't have that kind of reach. Across the room, Dad sat quietly. Julian noticed him and rolled his eyes. The judge continued. We'll proceed, but this court expects cooperation. Julian nodded quickly. Of course. Outside during recess, Julian paced. This is nothing, he told his lawyer. Routine. His lawyer didn't answer. I stood by the window. Julian snapped, You look pleased. I'm tired, I said. That won't save you. A reporter rushed past. Mr. Vance, comment on offshore reviews? Julian froze. What review? The reporter shrugged. Just asking. Julian turned on me. You're leaking. I don't even know what that means. He grabbed my arm. Stop pretending. Dad stepped forward. Let her go. Julian laughed. Or what? Dad didn't raise his voice. You'll regret it. Julian released me, amused. Threats now, Dad replied. Statements. Inside, testimony resumed. Julian's expert witness cleared his throat. Based on available data, he paused. Correction, updated data. Julian's lawyer frowned. When was this updated? This morning, the witness said. Julian snapped. By who? The witness avoided his eyes. Independent auditors. Julian stood. This is improper. Sit, the judge ordered. The witness continued. Several entities appear undisclosed. Julian shouted. Objection! Denied, the judge said. Answer. The witness swallowed. Funds moved offshore. Shell structures. Julian stared at the table. I whispered, You said you were clean. He hissed. You don't know anything. The judge asked, Mr. Vance, care to explain? Julian stood slowly. I'll need counsel. You have counsel, the judge replied. His lawyer didn't move. Julian whispered, Say something. The lawyer said quietly, I need time. The judge sighed. We will recess. In the hallway, Julian slammed a wall. This is sabotage. His lawyer said, Someone opened doors. Julian turned to me. Your father. I shook my head. He drinks tea. Julian laughed nervously. He's nobody. Dad walked past us. Julian sneered. Enjoy the show, old man? Dad stopped. It's just beginning. Julian's smile twitched. That night, Julian called. You want money? He asked. We can settle. Yesterday, you called me worthless. He exhaled. Business. Apologize. Silence. Thought so, I said, and hung up. Dad sat across from me. What did you do? I asked again. He folded his hands. I reminded people of unfinished business. People who? He smiled faintly. The kind who don't forget. My phone buzzed. A headline alert. Vance Tech merger delayed pending review. I looked up. Dad. He nodded. Delays make people talk. I swallowed. Is it over? He shook his head. It's moving. The next morning, Julian didn't post. No quotes, no smiles. In court, his chair sat empty for 10 minutes. When he arrived, his suit was wrinkled. He didn't look at me. For the first time, the room didn't belong to him. I leaned toward Dad. They're watching him. Dad replied softly, Now they're listening. I looked at Julian's shaking hands and finally understood. The quiet man hadn't raised his voice. He'd erased the noise. Why is everyone staring? I whispered. My lawyer murmured, because something leaked. Julian sat rigid, jaw locked. His lawyer leaned in. Do not speak unless I tell you. Julian snapped, I run companies. I don't get told to shut up. Today you do, the lawyer replied. The judge entered slower than usual. She didn't greet the room. She opened a new folder. Julian shifted. What's that? The judge looked up. A supplemental filing. His lawyer stood. Your Honor, we've received no notice. You have now, she said. Julian laughed nervously. This is getting theatrical. The judge's eyes hardened. Mr. Vance, sit. He sat. My lawyer whispered, This isn't normal. I whispered back, Nothing about him is normal. The judge spoke again. We will address financial discrepancies. Julian scoffed. Discrepancies? Yes, she said. Plural. A clerk handed documents to both sides. Julian flipped pages fast. Too fast. Where did this come from? He demanded. The judge replied, From parties with legal standing. Julian glanced at me. You've been busy, he said. I've been broke, I answered. A murmur spread behind us. Someone whispered, Shell companies. Another voice said, Offshore trusts. Julian's lawyer cleared his throat. We object to speculation. The judge nodded. So noted. Continue. Julian stood again. Your Honor, This is harassment. She didn't blink. Sit, or I will hold you in contempt. He sat hard. The witness was sworn in, Julian's former CFO. He wouldn't look at Julian. State your name, the clerk said. The man answered quietly. Julian hissed, Traitor. The CFO looked up. You told me to bury it. Julian stood. I never. Sit, the judge said again. The CFO continued. Funds were moved through layered entities. Julian's lawyer whispered urgently, Stop. The CFO didn't. I was instructed not to disclose them during divorce proceedings. Julian slammed his hand on the table. The judge said sharply, One more outburst. Julian glared at the witness. You're lying. The CFO met his eyes. You said courts only see what you show them. The room went silent. My lawyer inhaled sharply. The judge asked, Is that accurate, Mr. Vance? Julian laughed weakly. People misremember. The CFO shook his head. You bragged about it, Julian snapped. Shut up! The judge stood. Enough. Everyone froze. This court will not tolerate manipulation, she said. Julian's lawyer whispered, We need a recess. The judge nodded. Granted. Outside, Julian exploded. You flipped him, he shouted at me. I don't even know him. You poisoned everyone. A reporter rushed up. Mr. Vance, comment on internal whistleblowers. Julian shoved past. His lawyer grabbed his arm. Stop! Julian ripped free. This is a setup. Dad stood near the wall. Julian pointed at him. You, Dad replied calmly. Yes. What did you do? Julian demanded. Dad said, Nothing illegal. That's not an answer. It's the only one you get. Julian laughed shakily. You think you're powerful? Dad stepped closer. I think you were careless. Julian sneered. I built an empire. Dad replied, Empires collapse quietly. Julian leaned in. You're threatening me. Dad shook his head. I'm explaining. The bailiff called us back. Inside, the judge spoke without looking at Julian. This court orders a full forensic audit. Julian stood. That's excessive. The judge finally looked at him. No, she said. It's overdue. Julian's lawyer whispered, This is bad. Julian whispered back, Fix it. The lawyer didn't answer. The judge continued. Until then, asset control is suspended. I gasped. Julian shouted, You can't. She raised a hand. I just did. My lawyer squeezed my arm. Julian turned to me, eyes wild. You did this, he said. I stood slowly. You did. He laughed bitterly. You think you won? No, I said. I think you're finally being seen. The judge adjourned. People stood buzzing. Whispers followed Julian as he walked out. Not admiration. Suspicion. Outside, Julian stopped me one last time. This isn't over, he said. I met his eyes. It never was. He stormed off. Dad stood beside me. They're circling, I said. Dad nodded. Predators smell weakness. I exhaled. I'm scared. He looked at me. So are they. For the first time, the courtroom doors closed behind Julian, and the whispers stayed with him. They froze everything? I asked. My lawyer nodded. Temporary suspension, court ordered. Julian laughed from across the room. Don't celebrate. It's procedural. Is it? I asked. He leaned back. Audits take time. Time favors me. His lawyer didn't smile. The judge looked down. Mr. Vance, you will comply fully. Of course, Julian said. I'm transparent. A clerk handed him another notice. Julian's fingers tightened. What's this now? Subpoenas, the clerk replied. Julian scoffed. For what? Several jurisdictions, the judge said calmly. Julian stood. This is excessive. The judge replied, Sit. He sat. Outside the courtroom, phones buzzed. A reporter whispered, His banker resigned. Another said, the merger's dead. Julian snapped at his lawyer. Why didn't you warn me? I didn't know, the lawyer said. No one did. Julian glared. You're supposed to control this. I control arguments, the lawyer replied. Not evidence. I passed Julian in the hall. You look tired, I said. He smiled thinly. You look hopeful. Because I'm finally heard. He leaned close. Careful. Hope makes people sloppy. That afternoon, Julian's fixer called him. I heard Julian hiss, What do you mean you're out? Silence. Julian swallowed. You can't just... The call ended. Julian stared at his phone like it betrayed him. Dad watched from the bench. Julian noticed. Enjoying this? Dad replied. I don't enjoy consequences. Julian laughed harshly. You think this is about morals? Dad answered, No, it's about records. The next hearing began early. Julian's lawyer stood. We request time to respond. The judge nodded. You have 48 hours. Julian whispered, That's nothing. His lawyer whispered back, It's everything. A new witness was sworn in. Julian's former compliance officer. Julian shook his head. Unbelievable. The officer spoke softly. I raised concerns. Julian scoffed. You were paranoid. You told me to ignore them, the officer said. Julian laughed. You're bitter. The officer looked at the judge. I have emails. Julian stood. Objection. The judge said, Overruled. The officer continued. He said divorce courts don't dig. Julian's face drained of color. I whispered, You said no one would check. He whispered back, Shut up. The judge asked, Is that statement accurate? Julian hesitated. I don't recall. The officer replied, I do. Julian slammed his hand again. The judge's voice hardened. One more time. Julian sat, shaking. During recess, Julian cornered me. This ends if you settle, he said. You said that before. I'm serious. So am I. He lowered his voice. They'll destroy us both. They're destroying you, I said. I survived you. His eyes flicked to Dad. What did he promise them? Julian asked. Nothing, I said. You gave them everything. Julian laughed bitterly. You think you're clean? I know I am. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. This is special counsel, a voice said. We may need a statement. My hands shook. About what? About your husband. Ex, I corrected. Dad listened from the table. Julian called minutes later. Please, he said, just talk to me. I said nothing. You owe me, he added. I laughed softly. I paid already. He hung up. The next morning, Julian arrived late again. This time, no one waited. The judge started without him. When Julian rushed in, the room didn't turn. No whispers of respect. Only curiosity. Julian whispered to his lawyer, They're watching me. His lawyer replied, They're counting. The judge spoke. Mr. Vance, your credibility is in question. Julian forced a smile. That's unfair. She replied, So was locking your wife out. The room inhaled. Julian looked at me, stunned. I met his eyes. You told me courts only see what you show them, I said quietly. He whispered, You said nothing. I listened, I replied. The judge continued. This court recommends referral. Julian stood. Referral to what? She answered, Federal review. Julian's knees buckled slightly. His lawyer grabbed his arm. Outside, the air felt lighter. I exhaled. Is this real? Dad nodded. The fall always feels unreal. Julian passed us, eyes hollow. You win, he muttered. I shook my head. No, I stopped losing. He walked away alone. Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. This is the part where power leaves quietly. he said. I watched Julian disappear down the hall and understood. The fall didn't come with a crash. It came with silence. Please state your name for the record, the clerk said. I swallowed. Julia Vance. Julian didn't look up. My lawyer asked softly, Are you ready? I've been ready, I said. Julian muttered, Drama. The judge glanced at him. Mr. Vance. He fell silent. My lawyer began. Julia, how long were you married to Julian? 12 years. Julian scoffed. Felt longer, didn't it? The judge snapped, Enough. I continued. I helped build the company. Julian laughed. You proofread emails. I negotiated contracts, I said. I connected him to investors. That's hearsay, Julian said. It's my life, I replied. The judge nodded. Proceed. My lawyer asked, What happened the night you left the house? Julian stiffened. He changed the locks, I said. Julian shook his head. She walked out. I came back, I said. My key didn't work. Julian leaned forward. You're exaggerating. Then why were my books in the gutter? I asked. Silence. The judge asked, Mr. Vance, did you change the locks? Julian smiled weakly. For safety. Safety from whom? The judge asked. Julian hesitated. From instability. I laughed once. From witnesses. Julian snapped, Watch yourself. The judge said sharply, You will not threaten a witness. I exhaled. My lawyer continued. Julia, were funds restricted? Yes, Julian interjected. Temporarily. I couldn't buy groceries, I said. Julian shrugged. Budgeting matters. The judge frowned. Mr. Vance, he raised his hands. I'm listening. My lawyer asked, Did Julian ever discuss hiding assets? Julian stood. Objection. Overruled, the judge said. Answer. I said, Yes. Julian laughed loudly. Now she's lying. He said courts don't dig, I said. He said money is invisible, if you move it right. Julian pointed. That's fabricated. The judge asked, Did you say that, Mr. Vance? Julian looked at his lawyer. The lawyer said nothing. Julian replied, I don't recall. I said quietly, You said it after dinner. Julian whispered, Stop. You were proud, I said. You called it winning. The room felt tight. The judge nodded slowly. Continue. My lawyer asked, How did that make you feel? Julian rolled his eyes. Irrelevant. I answered anyway. Small, Julian laughed. You were always small. The judge slammed her pen down. Enough. Julian flinched. My lawyer asked, Why stay silent? I said, Because he said no one would believe me. Julian snapped, Because you were wrong. Because you were loud, I said, and I was tired. The judge looked at Julian. Volume is not truth. Julian leaned back pale. My lawyer concluded. No further questions. Julian's lawyer stood. Brief cross. He turned to me. You benefited from the lifestyle. Yes. You enjoyed the money. I earned it. You never filed complaints. I trusted my husband. Julian laughed. Mistake. The lawyer asked, Isn't this revenge? I looked at Julian. This is correction. The judge nodded. Answer stands. Cross ended. The judge addressed the room. The court has reviewed the audit. Julian stiffened. She continued. The findings are substantial. Julian whispered. This is bias. She ignored him. Undisclosed entities. False statements. Julian stood. I object. Sit, she said, or leave. He sat. She continued. This testimony is credible. Julian laughed hollowly. Unbelievable. The judge looked directly at him. No, it's documented. Julian's lawyer whispered, We're done. Julian shook his head. Fix it. There is nothing left to fix, the lawyer replied. The judge said, This testimony will be entered into record. The clerk stamped the file. The sound echoed. Julian stared at the table. I stepped down. Dad caught my eye. "You did well," he said quietly. Julian whispered as I passed, "You ruined me." I stopped. "You ruined you." The judge adjourned. People stood slowly. No applause, just wait. Outside, Julian lagged behind. A reporter asked, "Mr. Vance, comment on perjury concerns?" Julian didn't answer. He walked past me, shoulders hunched. Dad joined me. "It's written now," I said. Dad nodded. "Truth sticks when ink dries." I watched Julian disappear again. This time, without anger, without power. The record didn't shout. It didn't need to. It told the truth. "Everyone rise," the bailiff called. Julian stood slowly, like his legs no longer trusted him. I stayed still until Dad touched my arm. "Breathe." The judge entered with a thick stack of papers. Julian whispered, "This won't stick." His lawyer didn't respond. The judge sat. "Be seated." The room obeyed. She looked directly at Julian. "Mr. Vance, before we proceed, I want clarity." Julian forced a smile. "Of course, Your Honor." She lifted a document. "Do you dispute the audit?" Julian glanced at his lawyer. The lawyer stood. "We acknowledge the findings." Julian snapped, "You do?" The judge raised a brow. "Sit, Mr. Vance." He sat, breathing hard. The judge continued. "The court finds material misrepresentation." Julian shook his head. "That's an opinion." "It's a conclusion," she replied. My lawyer squeezed my hand. The judge spoke again. "This court reverses temporary control of assets." Julian jumped up. "You can't!" The judge didn't flinch. "I already am," she continued. "Mrs. Vance is awarded immediate access to marital accounts." Julian whispered, "This is insane." The judge added, "Including the residence." I gasped. Julian turned to me. "You planned this." "I survived you," I said quietly. The judge raised another page. "Additionally, sanctions are imposed." Julian laughed, hollow. "For what?" "For contempt," she said, "and deception." Julian's lawyer whispered, "Julian, stop." Julian ignored him. "This is a witch hunt." The judge looked unimpressed. "No, this is math." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge continued. "The court recommends referral to federal authorities." Julian stood again. "Recommend." She nodded. "Initiate." Julian's face drained. He whispered, "You're destroying my life." The judge replied, "You gambled it." She looked at me. "Mrs. Vance, you may speak." I stood, surprised. "I didn't expect—" "Go on," she said. I looked at Julian. "You told me winning meant leaving me with nothing." Julian whispered, "Don't." I continued. "You laughed while my books floated in the street." Julian closed his eyes. "I didn't come for revenge," I said. "I came for truth." The judge nodded. "Noted." She banged the gavel. "So ordered." The sound echoed. Julian sank into his chair. Outside, cameras waited. A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Vance, comment on the ruling." I paused. The court listened. Julian pushed past reporters. "Mr. Vance," someone yelled. "Federal review?" He didn't answer. In the hallway, Julian grabbed my sleeve. "This isn't finished," he said weakly. "It is," I replied. He looked past me at Dad. "You!" Julian spat. "You ruined me." Dad met his eyes. "You removed yourself." Julian laughed bitterly. "You think you're powerful?" Dad said calmly. "I think you forgot accountability." Julian stepped back like he'd been struck. His lawyer approached. "Julian, we need to talk." Julian snapped. "About what?" "About surrender," the lawyer said. Julian stared. "You're quitting?" "I'm surviving," the lawyer replied. Julian laughed, then stopped. No one joined him. We walked outside. The air felt different, lighter. My phone buzzed. "Funds restored," my lawyer texted. I exhaled sharply. "It's real." Dad nodded. "Paper cuts deepest." Julian stood across the street, alone. He stared at the courthouse, like it betrayed him. I remembered his smile on the first day, the one that broke me. Now it was gone. A reporter asked me, "Do you feel vindicated?" I shook my head. "I feel free." Dad smiled faintly. We walked away together. Behind us, Julian shouted into his phone. "No, you can't pull out." Silence answered. Dad leaned close. "Listen." I listened. No laughter, no applause. Just the sound of power leaving quietly. At the corner, I looked back. Julian slumped against the wall. No suit jacket, no entourage. Just a man learning the room never belonged to him. Dad touched my shoulder. "This is the turn." I nodded. "I know." For years, I had been shrinking. In one morning, the world expanded again. The verdict didn't make me dominant. It made me visible. And for Julian, visibility was the beginning of the end. "Are you okay?" Dad asked as we drove. "I don't know," I said. "I feel empty." He nodded. "That's normal after pressure lifts." My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Hello?" A shaky voice said, "Julia, it's Julian." Dad glanced at me. I put him on speaker. "You shouldn't be calling," I said. "I had to," Julian replied. "Everything's falling apart." "Your lawyer quit," I said. "He didn't quit," Julian snapped. "He abandoned me." "You abandoned me first," I replied. Julian laughed weakly. "I can fix this." "With what?" I asked. "Money," he said quickly. "I still have resources." Dad spoke calmly. "No, you don't." Julian froze. "Who is that?" "My father," I said. Julian scoffed. "You hiding behind him now?" Dad answered. "You hid behind structures." Julian snapped. "Stay out of this." Dad replied. "You invited me when you mocked my daughter." Julian's breathing grew fast. "I didn't mean it." "You laughed," Dad said. "I was angry," Julian pleaded. "You were proud," Dad corrected. Julian paused. "What do you want?" I answered. "Nothing from you." "That's impossible," Julian said. "Everyone wants something." Dad replied. "That's why you lost." Julian's voice dropped. "Please. Just tell them to stop." "Who?" Dad asked. "Them," Julian said. "Everyone." Dad said softly. "Consequences don't negotiate." Julian shouted. "You're enjoying this." "No," Dad replied. "I'm ending it." Julian whispered. "I'll apologize." "To me?" I asked. "To everyone," he said desperately. "Too late," I said. Julian's voice cracked. "You promised forever." "I promised honesty," I replied. "You broke it." He went silent. "I'm hanging up," I said. "Wait," Julian said. "Who are you?" I frowned. "What?" He whispered. "I don't recognize you." "I found myself," I said, and ended the call. The car stayed quiet. After a moment, I asked, "What did you really do?" Dad kept his eyes on the road. "I followed trails." "That's all?" "That's enough." "People flipped," I said. "Audits appeared." Dad nodded. "People talk when silence stops paying." I swallowed. "They call you something." Dad smiled faintly. "They used to." "What?" "The eraser," he said. I laughed nervously. "That's dramatic." "They needed drama," he replied. "I needed accuracy." At home, the house felt different. Still mine, still familiar. I set my books on the table. Dad watched. "You kept these." "They matter," I said. A knock came at the door. I froze. Dad raised a hand. "I'll handle it." He opened the door. 2 men stood there. "Arthur Vance?" one asked. "Yes," Dad replied. "We'd like a word," the man said. Dad nodded. "Inside." I whispered, Is this bad? Dad smiled. No, it's thorough. They spoke quietly. I heard phrases. Records confirmed. Cooperation noted. Federal interest escalating. Julian's name landed heavy in the room. After they left, I asked, "Was that about me?" Dad shook his head. About patterns. My phone buzzed again. A text from Julian. They took my accounts. I didn't reply. Another text. You promised you'd never hurt me. I typed, then erased. Dad watched me. You don't know silence anymore, I typed back. You hurt yourself. Julian replied instantly. He did this. I answered. No, you did. I set the phone down. Dad poured tea. You okay? He asked. I think so, I said. Outside, a car passed slowly. I flinched. Dad said gently, It's over. For him, I said. For you too, he replied, just differently. That night, I dreamed of water, not drowning, floating. The next morning, headlines filled my phone. CEO steps down amid investigation. Board cuts ties. Assets seized pending review. Julian's face looked smaller in every photo. Dad read the paper quietly. They're calling you a legend, I said. He shrugged. Legends fade. What doesn't? I asked. He looked at me. Records. My phone buzzed one last time. Julian again. I'm sorry. I stared at it. Then I blocked the number. Dad nodded once. Power, he said, is quiet when it's done right. I looked around my house, my books, my space, my name. For years, I thought power was loud. I was wrong. It was a father who didn't raise his voice, and a truth that didn't stop walking. Chapter 8 ended without applause, just certainty, and for the first time, peace. Do you want to go? Dad asked. I looked at the courthouse across the street. I should. It's not your burden anymore, he said. I know, I replied, but I need to see it. The courtroom was smaller. No cameras, no crowd. Julian sat alone at the defense table, no tailored suit. No confidence, just a man staring at his hands. He didn't see me at first. The clerk called his name. Julian stood too slowly. The judge entered and didn't look at him. Be seated, she said flatly. Julian sat. The prosecutor spoke. Mr. Vance, you are aware of the charges. Julian nodded. Yes. His voice was barely there. You've reviewed the evidence? Yes. No objections? No speeches? Just facts? Julian's lawyer leaned in. Answer clearly. Julian whispered, I am. The judge finally looked up. Mr. Vance, do you wish to speak? Julian hesitated. Then he looked around, at the empty benches, at the door, at nothing waiting for him. Yes, he said. His voice cracked. I made mistakes. The judge didn't respond. Julian continued. I didn't think it would go this far. The prosecutor asked, Why not? Julian swallowed. Because it never did before. That landed heavy. The judge said, That will be noted. Julian glanced toward the back. Our eyes met. His widened, not anger, recognition. After the hearing, Julian was escorted out a side door. No words, no confrontation, just movement. Outside, Dad waited with the car. You saw him, he said. Yes. And? Dad asked. I don't feel anything, I said. Dad nodded. That's closure. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A notification, final divorce order executed. I read it twice, then laughed. Dad smiled. Good? Yes, I said. Final. At home, I packed the last box of papers. Old statements, old emails, old pain. I carried them to the trash. Dad watched. You sure? He asked. I don't need proof anymore, I said. The box dropped. It felt light. That evening, we sat on the porch. The sun dipped low. Neighbors waved. Some smiled apologetically. I waved back. Dad sipped tea. You never told me why you stopped doing all that, I said. He glanced at me. Because it takes something. Like what? Time, he said, and distance. Was it worth coming back? I asked. He looked at me. Always. My phone buzzed again. A message request. Unknown. I didn't open it. Dad noticed. You don't have to read that. I know, I said, and deleted it. The next morning I returned to my work. My research, my name on the paper. Colleagues treated me differently now. Not pity, respect. One of them said quietly, I'm glad you spoke. So am I replied. Weeks passed. Julian's name faded from headlines, then disappeared. One afternoon, I saw him again. At a grocery store. He wore a baseball cap. He looked thinner. He saw me. Stopped. For a moment, he smiled. The old reflex. Then he remembered. The smile fell. Julia, he said. Julian, I replied. He hesitated. I never thought. I know, I said. He nodded. You won. I shook my head. No. I left. He looked confused. That's worse, he said. For you, I replied gently. He watched me walk away. Didn't follow. At home, Dad asked, see anyone interesting? I smiled. No. That night, I stood in my study. My books lined the shelves. Dry. Safe. Mine. I thought about the first day in court. Julian's smile. The way it broke me. I understood now. It only worked because I believed it meant something. Power doesn't live in rooms. It lives in truth. And truth doesn't smirk. It waits. If you've made it this far, tell me what you think. Was the verdict justice or just inevitable? Comment below, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories where silence speaks louder than arrogance. Because sometimes the loudest victory is walking away whole.